I think one of the hardest parts about working on the back is that it's the first thing we learn in massage school, and so it's so easy to get bored with that work and to rely on the same tools over and over and over again. So today I'm going to talk about the back in a different way and remind us, not that any of us need reminding, but remind us that the back is unbelievably complicated and there are so many ways to think about it and work with it that are new and different. My focus for this video is going to be the ERECTOR SPINAE group, and if you really look at it, you notice how many origins, how many insertions, and how many moving parts there are to this incredibly long, incredibly strong group of muscles. If you notice, I start by locating where the spinous processes are, up the back, and I'm going to start with the spinalis. The spinalis is the first of the three if we're going to start medial and work lateral. It's the one closest to the spine itself, closest to the spinous processes, and my focus with this work is to find those spinous processes, sink just lateral into the lamina groove, and create some space in between those bones, those attachment sites, and those stringy lines of the spinalis that goes all the way up from the lumbar spine all the way up through the cervical spine. Using a very deep, very subtle friction, I'm just creating that space and releasing those attachment sites. This is a very narrow margin. I want to give this whole area some room to breathe. And as you can see, I'm kind of following through all the way to the insertion of the longissimus, which is way up at the mastoid process, but I want them all to feel connected, so I don't want to leave that out. With this work, you're really thinking about separating that connective tissue and offering those layers some space. And with the next step of work that I'm going to do, I'm going to instead think about the muscular components and the strongest part of this muscle group, which is the longissimus, which lies in between the spinalis and the iliocostalis. I remember first learning how to work on this muscle and not feeling like I could really get a hold of it because every time I tried to get onto it, I would slide off and I got so frustrated and I think I gave up. But I found over time that really sinking into the top of this muscle, the medial aspect of this muscle, the lateral aspect of this muscle, and exploring every part of it gave me a good sense of where it is and how it works, how it likes to be worked on. Some really good kind of like kneading the dough, compression and pulling away from the spine, I think is really effective and can soften this muscle and allow it to disconnect and allow it to lengthen and breathe. As this muscle softens up and I can start to do more specific work into the belly of this muscle, I want to think about the thoracolumbar aponeurosis, which is a really big fancy word for all the connective tissue down at the base of the spine, but I love saying it, I love using it, I love sounding smart, so there you go. But as I'm sinking in, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about all of those layers of connective tissue and fascia and the layers of muscles and all the muscles that come and attach down into that lower part of your back. Because the longissimus is an integral part of that area, and when that muscle gets tight, when the longissimus gets tight, it can really pull up at the sacrum, it can really pull up at the iliac crest and affect the SI joint. And so oftentimes the longissimus along with the spinalis and the iliocostalis can get overlooked when people are looking at SI joint dysfunction or any kind of a pelvic tilt. Really important to loosen this up and let this be a part of the hip sitting back into a place that it's more comfortable and can have less pain. And then of course on a more philosophical level, this muscle goes all the way from the sacrum to the base of the skull. So you're really thinking about the connection between your hips and your head, your core and your thoughts. It is an incredibly essential part of the essence of who you are. But back to the thoracolumbar aponeurosis, I definitely like to make sure I give a nice broad myofascial stretch in there. So hooking it with my left hand and sliding up using all of my palm, making sure that all of that connective tissue is nice and stretched out. With the more superficial layers softened up, I'm now able to sink a little bit deeper, and I think that's one of the tricks of a really good bodywork session. Being able to wait until the tissue allows you to sink down is something that we learn, it's something that we talk about, but having the patience to do it is going to be the difference between the work that feels good for a day or two and the work that feels good for weeks and months on end. So once those first layers have softened, I'm really sinking down deeper in, using one of my thumbs for the pressure and my other thumb to guide it and allow me to stay right in the position that I need to stay in, and talking to my client, having them breathe, and allowing those tissues to unravel on the deeper level, down where the ribs are and down where everything is connected to her breath and connected to her movement of her spine. I've switched here to flatter finger pads because I think when you get away from the lumbar area and start getting onto the flat aspect of the thoracic area and the ribs, I think thumbs can be a little pokey, and so I like to feel like I'm broadening my pressure and allowing the muscles to kind of soften underneath my fingers, as opposed to feeling like I'm pinching them or compressing them in a way that's uncomfortable. I wish I had a different camera angle here, but what you can't see is I'm pushing down on my client's left leg with my left hand and having her lift her leg up off the table. And that creates this contralateral contraction across the hip up to the right side of the lower back. As she does that, I'm sinking with my right hand and sliding up away from the hip and creating a nice stretch and bringing awareness to that opposition of movement from the back to the hip to the leg and back up. I'm doing this again with a more specific approach with my thumbs, having her lift her left leg up, sinking my thumbs into those muscles and creating a lot of space, creating a lot of movement, and as she relaxes, really sliding up and opening that space. The last technique I'm going to show you for the erector spinae group is a great lengthening technique for the back from a side lying position. It's really hard to move the back around with your client, either supine or prone, so I'm putting my client on her side, draping her back so that I have access to all of those muscles. And what I'm going to do is sink in, either using a palm or a soft fist or an elbow, and as I do, I'm going to have her bring her body into a fetal position. That does a couple things. Number one, it contracts the anterior muscles, which forces and enables the posterior muscles to let go, but it's also creating a really unique pin and stretch. So as I sink in and she curls her body into that rounded position, it does a couple of things. It not only lengthens those muscles from her action, but it also lengthens them from my pressure. That combination can be really powerful and really effective. Happy New Year, you guys. Happy 2017. I hope you guys have an amazing year. And my New Year's resolution is to hit 10,000 subscribers. So pass it on, tell your friends, tell your body workers, and don't forget to be awesome.